August is a funny month. It's a funny month of slowness. Not a whole lot happens. I'm just sort of back from a festival, I think. Don't know where I am, but I think we might go for August's edition of Molten Music Monthly. Yeah, so, well, I mean, it's the summer, right? So nothing really happens. There's nothing of note. Very little actually occurs in the world of music technology, synthesizers and other bits and pieces. And probably more the better, because we're all outside getting far too hot or getting burnt or sitting on the beach or generally farting around. And who really wants to talk about gear at a time like this? But hey, this is what we're here for ultimately. So I have dug around, found a few bits and pieces. This month is going to be largely sort of boutique-y and modular-y, I imagine. There's still plenty of it about, but there's no big releases from the big guns, I don't think. At least not that I've noticed. But I've been away, so I mean, they could have slipped all sorts of things under the radar that I have no idea about. No idea about. Anyway, I'm sure you could tell this is going to be a fun-packed, slightly delirious, I haven't had enough sleep for the last few days type Molten Monthly. So what have we got? Well, let's do a thing. Ready? So Pittsburgh truncate their menagerie. Noise Lab gets throaty. Vamy possibly go through zero. RYK vectors in some waves. Liquid Sky bamboozles with alien devices. Voltage Vibes helps you route cables. Tesseract Modular gets its faders in step. Future sound systems, filters, folds and fiddles about. Busy circuits sequences like it's 1984. Hikari modulates the modulator. TRONIX audio does weird things with melody. Noise engineering does the same thing but different. Faded Instruments opens up a 1U sweet shop. Elta Music puts a Soviet filter in a box. Tenderfoot gets triggered. GhostInTranslation has a new drone. Cherry Audio makes a crappy looking synth sound flipping awesome. Ginkosynthese has volcanic compression. Simon the Magpie pulls a drone out of his pocket. Twisted Electrons has another go at FM. And AtomoSynth gets a semi. But first we have the news that WMD are planning to close by the end of the year. This is another casualty of the component shortage and the cost of everything going up. And it's really sad to see such a legendary, you could say, modular manufacturer just have to give it all up. I mean, WMD have made modules for all sorts of people, as well as doing some of their own quite extraordinary bits and pieces. I mean, the one that probably everybody knows is the performance mixer, which is probably the tidiest, most efficiently laid out and usable performance mixer in modular. It's always been a mixer that I've aspired to have. The more recent module is the Metron, which is an extraordinary, beautiful looking trigger sequencer. And recently they've had a whole bunch of drum modules come along, like the Crater and the Crucible, the Chimera and the Fracture. Yeah, lots of interesting stuff. But in order to celebrate, commiserate, I don't know, just as they're coming to the end of their life, they've released 3 new modules which they hope will help them over the humps of letting people go and closing down factories and other bits and pieces. So within the 3 you have Legion, which is an analog oscillator, which has a Roland Alpha Juno inspired sawtooth section. Kind of a super saw thing going on is the idea. They have Orion, which is an analog phaser, which is fun. And then Subway, which is an 8-input, 1-output crossfade scanner. The idea being that you turn the knob to scan between any one of the 8 inputs to output that to the outputs. So you zoom through, scan through inputs to a single output. Good for weird modulations, mixing audio sources together, kind of whatever you like. I mean, WMD continue to innovate and to be interesting, even when they're out the door, you know. And I imagine we're going to see more of this, and it's very, very sad. But that's also why I want to spend the time today in talking about lots of the boutique makers, in the hope that we can find interest and reasons to buy and investment and all sorts of things in the people who are trying to build these fabulously creative tools for us to all play with and enjoy. And in order for that to continue, we have to keep We have to keep investing. We have to keep looking. We have to keep trying these sorts of things out and investing what spare cash we have into the industry that we love so much. Noise Lab have a new filter out, a formant filter, which seems to be a little bit on trend at the moment. For some reason, we like those throaty sounds. I don't know that it's really my thing, but there's a lot of it about, and so it must be something that people enjoy. Anyway, this in the fabulous Noise Lab style is called the Formantic. So what it does is combine two 12 dB bandpass filters with a single 24 dB low pass filter. Each one has its own resonance and filter cutoff controls, and if you really want to push it about, then they can all do their own bit of self oscillation. But I guess what stands out about the Formantic is that it's got a little weedy joystick on the front. Now, joystick is to take control of both of those bandpass filters, giving you all sorts of expressive and intuitive control over where those cutoffs are going to be, where your peaks are going to be, the sort of vowel sounds that you can sculpt with it, just with that little bit of thumminess on the front. I think that makes it really quite interesting. The VME OSIOP, I think it is a through zero oscillator. What is this through zero thing about? It keeps cropping up, and you keep looking at it going, well, but it's like an oscillator. How is the through zero thing different? Good question, and one that I don't feel remotely qualified to answer, although perhaps I'll throw out there from the top of my head the idea that is to do with frequency modulation. You stick another oscillator into it, and rather than just wobbling in the positive side of things, it will wobble in both directions. Again, what does that mean? Oh, I don't know. Apparently it creates a more musical FM tonality. Let's go with that, shall we? Now, the OSIOP really does look the business. The blue, silver and black all dazzlingly projected from this front panel, I think looks pretty fantastic. And you've got 4 waveform outputs to play with, and also a sub oscillator output. So as a standard standalone oscillator, it's going to look really nice, really nice in your rack. And then you can pile in the modulation, as I say, either in a regular FM way or in a through zero FM way. I think we should all get together and explore what the heck that means. Maybe I'll do something on it. Maybe. It also has wave shaping, where you can use the internal sine wave to start modulating and pushing the other waveforms about. It's kind of seen as a more of an additive quality, where you're combining and adding waveforms together rather than splitting them apart. And at some point within this wave shaping and through zero FFFing, then kind of carriers and operators start to emerge. It's complicated stuff, you know. People come at these things from all sorts of strange angles that just make you scratch your head. But there's definitely a fundamental place that people come at something from, trying to achieve something in particular. It's just sometimes hard to enter into the mind of the modular maker to try to work out exactly where they're coming from. But on the other hand, fabulous looking oscillator with a lot of potential for sound mangling and tonal shifting that could go well. This is a stunning looking thing, Vector Wave from RYK Modular. Now, RYK have, up to this point, only really made the M185 sequencer. It's a big, chunky System 100 sequencer that your man recently brought down and expanded into Eurorack into the fabulous M185 sequencer. I love it. It's like 8 steps with lots of different gate stoppings on it. It's the thing that inspired that one from IntelliGel, was it? Oh, I can't even remember now. But anyway, the M185 has been a fantastic module all by itself for sequencing and interesting things. This has been in development for a little while, the Vector Wave, and it's been creeping into Instagram posts for ages, making me go, oh, there's something fascinating coming along here, and this is looking that way. So what is it? Well, it's like a Vector Wave synthesizer in a module with this fantastic lo-fi LED display, which has been used to show envelopes, to show spectrums, to show routing and all sorts of interesting bits and pieces. But not just does it look good, does it sound good? Well, this is a question. Still trying to work that one out. I mean, it could be really, really interesting. I mean, vector synthesis is basically the idea of having 4 sound sources and then using a joystick to move between them. The closer you get to a corner, on a square plane, the closer you get to that particular sound. So as you sit somewhere between them, you get little elements of each, and that essentially gives you your vector synthesis. And within the vector wave, what you actually get is 16 oscillators, 4 per bank. Each bank, I'm assuming, sitting in a corner that you then move between. They can be configured to crash into each other, or just layer on top of each other, or FM into each other, of course, because we're always forever doing that. And all of the waveforms can be morphed into triangles, into sawtooths, into other waveforms, and sonic blending within its wave warping engine. Ultimately, though, what's going to happen is you're going to get your thumb on that little joystick. Oh yeah, you've got your Formant filter from Noise Lab over here with one thumb, and you've got your vector wave over here on another, and you're just going to be blending, trying to find somewhere in here. I'm going to find the sound that I like. Yes, I will in a minute. No, I'm still going to search. Still going to keep on going. Just keep on wobbling the joystick. You know, that kind of thing. So there's all sorts of possibilities to be found in here. Now, with a bit of luck, I might be getting one in for review, and so I'll give that a good rummage around to see what it is we can make of it. But it looks totally solid and amazing. It's also MIDI-able, which means potentially you could be playing like polyphonic stuff with it, if that's something that your rack can do, or if that's something you want to bring a bit of a keyboard into your rack and play with that way. That's another way of doing it. It also has an expander module to it, which adds another 3 channels of CV and gate, giving you a 4-channel polyphonic CV controllable sound source within your rack. You know, all of these things are really exciting, really. So I can't quite wait to get my hands on it and give it a bit of a go. Liquid Sky, then, they're a delicious bunch of weirdos, sort of an artistic community where they get together and bang electrons together until things form into extraordinary explorations into both sound, noise, nuttiness, you know, all sorts of bits and pieces. They vowed never ever to get involved in Eurorack. They like to express their hardware in larger, you know, less modulated fashions or something. And then here they are, kicking off a range of Eurorack modules. Fantastic. Well, what all that really means is that the rest of us finally get a chance to immerse ourselves in their form of madness, and they're not disappointing. Really, you've got 2 things. I mean, they're launching this range of UFO inspired modules that they are calling D-Vices, D-Vices. Is that important? Oh, I don't know. I mean, you know, we've got to think about the artwork on the front. I mean, that's fabulous, as well as the sound and routing possibilities, because, you know, that's fabulous. And then you've got the glitching and the reworking hackableness of the circuits, which is, again, also fabulous, coupled with the fact that most of the profits that come from these devices will be used to plant trees, which, again, is fabulous. So you've got too much fabulousness, I think, going on in one thing. But however, what is it about? Well, the first one is called the V4CO, and it's a dual 8-bit wavetable oscillator. So 2 wavetables, 8 bits, a bit crunchy, like 2 of those within a module that's really wide, luxuriously wide, so you've got plenty of room for sliders and knobs, and you can make space and work out how these 2 things are going to either play independently or work with each other or crash into each other or just generally do weird bubbly things in the background. But it also has a companion board, and it took me a while to get my head around it, and I don't actually believe that I have as yet. So there's another module which is just as big as this, but it's called the Glitch, well, it's badly spelt Glitch board, and it just seems to be a panel of patch sockets. And in the demo video, you're going, what's he doing? He's patching a couple of things, and it's really, in some ways, it's quite. I mean, I don't mean to be rude, but in the demo video, it's like, oh yes, you can hear this. You can hear the sound of the V4CO. Yes, hear the sound. Now, wait until I do this. Clunk, clunk, and nothing changes, and you go, and then let me do this, and then there's this tiny change. You go, oh, is there something going on in there? So it still remains a little bit mysterious. I mean, I completely have absolute faith in Liquid Sky that they know what they're doing, because they are, after all, fabulous, as I said in the first place. And so this glitch board thing needs some exploration, need to get down into the guts of it and go, what is going on? Because there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of sound, and slight changes in sound. What is it we're going for? What is it we're trying to find? Where is it all going? Because there must... No, not to say that there's a plan. I don't think there is a plan. There is weirdness at play, but there seems to be an extraordinary amount of potential and opportunity within that glitch board to patch in all sorts of weirdness. And I think you can essentially patch everything to everything. So every element within every wavetable, every parameter can be cross-fed other bits from other bits. So the potential and the possibility of noise and sound and tonalness is, of course, endless. But what is it all about? I don't know. I don't know, but I'm interested in finding out. Pittsburgh Modular are still working towards something on the horizon, something huge, something important. Because every month or so, they come up with another couple of animals in their menagerie of recent experimental modules, which are quirky, interesting, expansive, innovative, and good looking as well. Looking fabulous with all the artwork. Currently, their latest ones is the Elephant and the Narwhal, which are percussive modules. And these follow on from the llama, was it, and the polar bear, which was similarly percussive in one way or another. But apparently the elephant drum is a reimagining of the Pollard Syndrum that was some kind of weird 1970s drum synthesizer. I mean, it probably doesn't look much like it, but apparently that's the idea, that's the inspiration, that's the sort of the vibe they're going for. So the elephant can create all sorts of like weird drum sounds. And you have controls like tension, stuff that speaks of drum heads and objects that are being clattered around the place. The Narwhal, on the other hand, is a cymbal. It uses a form of analog physical modelling and sounds something along the lines of something which you could describe as not quite being unlike a cymbal. You can get all sorts of squeaks and noises and clangs and tins and pshh out of it. I mean, when you squeak it all down to a hi-hat, it's certainly very convincing on that. Otherwise, you're looking at weird sounding, analog sounding, strangely synthetic percussive sounds. And the question just becomes increasingly, as we've had a year or so of these bits of weirdness, where is it all going? What's going to happen? Is there a massive synth around the corner? I mean, there's more of these modules to come. You see them when Richard does his demos of the various modules. There's always something else knocking around in the background. So it's fascinating to know exactly where this is going to go. Obviously, we've seen some of it spill out into the Create Audio products, the East Beast and the West Best. And hopefully, maybe, there'll be more of that sort of thing to come. But it just feels like Pittsburgh are heading towards some big synthesizer of their own. And that is terribly, terribly exciting. Voltage Vibes. I like Voltage Vibes because they listened to me and made a module in my honour. Which is nice. But anyway, they keep coming up with interesting ideas. Well, alright, let me rephrase that. They've got one bog standard idea, nicely done, which I quite like, and another one which looks just potentially awesome. Which again, I mean, I like awesome things. I can't really help it. Anyway, the first one is called NixPatch. Is it? Nix as in not nick your mate down the road. And Nix as in, I don't know what that means. NIX patch. I don't know. So what you got is 8, 16, 42, 3, 14. There we go. There's a good number. You got 14 holes on a Eurorack module. Are you with me? I don't even know if I'm with me. It's 14 holes right on a module and then 14 holes on another one connected with a ribbon cable. So the idea, it's a basic simple idea, is that you put one over here and you put one down here and you can plug things into there and they'll pop up out of here. It's a cable tidying exercise, which is nice. You transplant CV from one place to another. Very useful. It could be useful, for instance, for ferreting for ferreting drum triggers around the place, like a drum machine from, like you got your drum machine down here because it's most useful to access, but you've got your drum modules up here. You can just go bonk, bonk, bonk into there, bing, 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 they all come out over there, and that just makes things tidy without having to stretch cables everywhere. Do we want our patch cables tidied? Not necessarily, but maybe it could be useful sometimes if you did. So there's that, and there's more bits and pieces like that Voltage Vibes are coming out with all the time. Useful routing and helpful things within your rack. But something else is popping up on Instagram, which is I'm not sure what it's called yet. I think it might be called the drop. And it starts to create interesting things in your imagination as to what it could be. Because there's only been pictures so far. It's going to be released or shown at the Dutch Modular Fest, which someone perhaps in the comments can tell us when that is. It's got to be soon though, isn't it? And what it appears to have is a fader and a big button. So in my head, I'm imagining you've got this build up, which it says build up at the top. So you gradually push something. Is it level? Don't know. Is it CV? Don't know. You push it, you push it, you push it, you push it, push it. And then there's a button which makes it all suddenly disappear. The drop. Or maybe it's the opposite. I don't know. Anyway, I'm intrigued. You should be too. Now, Tesseract Modular keeps playing with these big arrays of faders. It keeps coming up with new ideas and interesting things to do with it. This one is a Mark II of the step fader, which is something they've already done, but now they're going to do it slightly differently, going to improve it. They've brought a whole button interface in, which used to be something sort of different and more complex to use. And you've just got outputs and inputs galore for all of it. So what does it do? Well, it's a dual channel sequencer. So essentially you've got 16 faders. There's actually 18 faders because there's like a master fader as well as the step faders. And you can use it as a single 16-step sequencer or two 8-step sequencers and have them either fiddling about independently or working together in some kind of way. So it gives you an awful lot of space for running two tunes together, which I like a lot. But it has all sorts of modes in which it explores those faders, so it can just go straight there and back. But it also can randomize about the place and probabilityize about the place. It has an inbuilt quantizer, which cuts out a nice middleman there, giving you kind of instant melody rather than having to muck about with too much thinking about how you're going to quantize things at a later date. So as with most Tesseract stuff, it's there, it's very accessible, it's very much hands-on, move things about where you want to do, and then having to cope with a few button presses in order to change modes and to change what it is that those faders are actually representing. But ultimately, it looks like a really fun way to deal with a pair of sequencers. Future sound systems always manage to generate something weird and interesting. And the Phil 4 timbral sculpting machine, sculptor, harmonic, crazy, zappy zippy. Oh, I don't know. The Future Sound Systems Phil 4 it's a filter. It's a filter with folding. It's a folding filter that fiddles with stuff. It's a filtering, folding fiddler of frequencies and fudging. I suspect it has filtering. Analog filtering stuck in there, but it has weird stuff like folding within the resonance circuit. I don't quite really understand what that means. I think the idea is that you've got some nice crunchy bit of filtering going on, and then what you want to do is really distort that. And you distort that by folding the waveforms or the circuitry signals that are passing through the resonance circuit somehow. And then when you're finished doing that, you should fold it again through some other bit of wave folding nonsense in a Buchla style West Coast kind of thing. So you've got pings and pongs, and you've got crunches and cringes. So you've got filtering, multi-modes, lots of bandpass, high pass, low pass. You know, it's a Future Sound Systems module. So it's going to be gritty and gruesome and fabulously fun to play with. It's going to be generating harmonics and then letting you fold those into other harmonics. It's going to be filtering out bits of stuff before folding them back in again. So it's an exploration, it's a playground, it's a fun adventure park of filtering and distortion and sound mangling. I mean, what else is there to say about it? Now, I might have mentioned this before from a super booth, and this is the ALM Busy Circuits ASQ1, which is a stunning looking little sequencer inspired and based upon the Roland SH101 sequencer. What does that mean? Oh, it means you just tap in a bunch of notes and the notes are there and it sequences. I don't really know why it seems to always be thrown at the SH101 as if that's the source of this sort of sequencing, when it seems to me to be just basic step sequencing in any form, shape or otherwise. But I remember using an SH-101 back in the 1980s that I borrowed off a mate. And doing the sequencer was just absolute joy. I thoroughly enjoyed it. You would just tap in notes and it would then, that would be it. And it would never be quite what you thought it was, because you're putting notes in and you put a rhythm to that. The rhythm doesn't exist when it comes out the other end, because all you're doing is filling in steps. You're not putting in a performance. And so you put the da 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 da, and it just comes out. And so it gives it this quite unique ability to generate melodies that weren't necessarily exactly what you thought they were going to be. But of course they can be. And that's the point, because once you get the hang of it, you get the hang of putting in the notes and the rests and the ties, and once you grasp all of that, you can start entering melodies really, really fast. So the ASQ1, if you excuse the passing jets, I don't have time to wait for the skies to clear today. I'm just going to crack on. So in the ASQ1, what you get is 2 channels of this sort of melodic sequencing, along with 4 channels of trigger sequencing, and all of it is run. Shut up! And all of it is run on this clickety-clackety mechanical keyboard style interface. I mean, as a module, it's quite big. It's got quite a lot of expanse to it, which makes it quite, luxurious. I don't know, there's a word that I can't quite find which to describe the unnecessarily large size of something. Anyway, what you get is a very functional front end, a very touchy-feely front end, which allows you to sequence, and also it'll run the light through to give you like 8 steps at a time of percussive sequencing. Now there's lots and lots of steps you can do within here. You can save and load bits and pieces. It also has a clock, although it would really like it if you had a PAM's workout to plug into it to be the clock. It would much prefer that. But otherwise, what you appear to have is this extremely playable and melody-focused Eurorack sequencer. I have one here that I have not yet managed to take out of the box. However, Sunday night, right, at our live stream, that's what I'll do. The plan for Sunday night, which I'll tell you at the end, but so I'll tell you a little bit now, is for our live stream where we just usually chat and just drink beer. What we're going to do is just plug in all the stuff that's been sent to me over the summer, or that I've bought over the summer, because I haven't had time to plug any of it in. So we're just going to plug it all in and see what happens. So there's that, there's a few other bits and pieces, just to stuff it all in and have a bit of a play. Have some first reactions from some bits of gear. That will be fun, so come and join us for that. Otherwise, ASQ1 from Busy Circuits, ALM. I don't know whether it's ALM or Busy Circuits. I've never known. I don't think I'll ever sort that one out. But whatever it is the company's called, the product is the ASQ1, and it looks awesome, and I'm really looking forward to playing with it. A quick one from Hikari Instruments. It's a dual LFO. 2 LFOs, not 1 LFO. No, this is 2 LFOs in a single module. I mean, can you imagine it? Can you imagine it? I don't mean to be flippant about it, but what this does, the idea behind this particular dual LFO is that you've got these two sources of modulation which are going to be completely independent or crossing into each other and farting around to create more complex oscillations and therefore complex modulations. You have various waveform shapes and also wave shaping between them. You can choose whichever the output you want to use, either independent outputs or merged outputs. So this is really all about having a couple of sources of modulation which you want to push into each other for more interesting possibilities. It has an offset, so you can get the timing either bang on or start to shift them apart from each other to see how much they're going to overlap or how that affects the kind of output you get. It has this strange barcode-esque front end to it, which I find a little bit baffling. It just makes it hard to see. At least that's how I feel, but I've never really seen one in the flesh. But it's certainly very interesting, and it's not something that I've done a lot of. I tend to take an LFO and just use it as it's bare moving about. I like a sine wave. I like a movement like that. That seems to thrill me. So I think it would be interesting to start to merge those sorts of things together. And the dual LFO from Hikari is certainly designed to do that. TRONIX Audio Roots. This is a weird fella. I don't quite know what to make of it. It's doing what exactly? Well, they call it a musical sequencer generator. So it generates sequences. Through some forms of randomization or sample and hold, or some kind of triggerable comparating. Comparating? Is that a word? I don't really know. I mean, ultimately, you fiddle with the knobs and it creates some kind of melody, which is nice. I mean, it has its own VCA. It has an LFO inside, which is moving stuff about, and then it's sampling itself through its movement, I think, and then you can push things out of a gate output or a CV output in order to generate melodies and gates. I'm not explaining it very well, but then I don't really fully understand it. I have to say, but in like the demo videos, there just seems to be an element of moving stuff about and sound being generated, or melodies being generated through whatever it is sound source you're going to plug it into, and that looked like a load of fun. It's like craziness, HHP worth of craziness, and you know, if nothing else, our modular should have crazy fun in it. Noise Engineering are a company who know what they're doing. Oh my goodness, yes. While many others are struggling with the old component shortage, Noise Engineering have found a couple of DSP platforms, or the same platform perhaps running on two slightly different sized modules. They have now the Versio platform they've had for a while, which had started off with like the reverb and then a delay, then other weird stuff going through that. And now they've got the Legio platform, which is a smaller, sort of half the size, I think, in 6 HP, which has run different things. So, and they seem to be sticking with those. So every so often they release a new Versio, which gives you a new front panel and a new firmware, which you can then, the beauty of it is you can run that firmware in all the other Versios in the past. So whatever Versio you buy at any point, whatever version of it with that particular front panel, you can run all of the firmwares. And while that can be a bit confusing in terms of front panel, because your front panel may be different, at the same time you're still getting a whole load more functionality within a module that you already own for free, which is awesome. So their new platform, the Legio platform, is a similar idea, and this is the next release of that. So what do we have? We have Tymp. Tymp. I can pronounce it like I think straight off the bat. I can pronounce it. The other one is Polydactyl. So both of these are gifts to me, who usually stumble around with their Latin phrases trying to work out what on earth they're talking about. So what do these do? Tymp is a slimmed down version of the Bacillus iteratus Elta. Now that is one weird module. It's a digital percussive crazy module that creates all sorts of weird sounds that I just can't seem to find a use for. I mean, if you're into clangs and bangs, that is the thing. And Tymp is like a scaled down version of that, giving you slightly less craziness, but all of the potential sound weirdness within it. But don't get me wrong, it's a fabulous thing. The Bacillus iteratus Elta is a stalwart of a module that everybody really should have. And, you know, you could always get more modulated clang in your life. And Tymp seems to do that in a smaller, more interesting, and slightly more wacky way through the use of the Wackitude knob. Everyone could do one of those, I think. With the Teledactyl Versio, you get a multiband compressor and saturator. So a big fat module that you stick at the end of the chain of something. So when you're fed up with it becoming a reverb or grain delay or some other weird stuff that it's been, you can then turn it into a module that will completely tidy up your mix at the end of things. So Noise Engineering are going great guns with these two things. I think it's a great way forward. It's a great way to continue to do development on a platform, which means that people who already own your stuff are going to get added value down the line. I think that's great. Now, Faded Instruments are a plug-in company that suddenly decided to release a whole bunch of candy-coloured 1U modules. They're great. I mean, there's nothing particularly unexpected except for maybe one or two, but for the most part, you've got awesome utilities that you would use all the time. You've got mults, you've got attenuators, little mixers, patch bays, all sorts of things, but all of them look great. You know, there's something refreshing about having colourful modules within your URAC, because often black and silver tends to be the way, and so injecting a little bit of fun and brightness, I think is no bad thing, particularly in 1U, which can seem complex. All those utility modules in 1U, you're sort of going, it's so difficult. What do I use them for again? Whereas this at least brings light upon the subject. And there is one in particular that deserves a little bit more attention. That's called the Jangler. The Jangler, it's got touch plates on it, so you start using your body as some form of control voltage modulation through the currents and the electricity that's inherent within the wetness and saliva and sweat of your body. So what happens? Oh no, you plug things into it and then you jam a load of things in and it changes stuff about. Awesome. We like a bit of that. Route this from there to there, route that from there to there, crush that, squish that. Cool, yeah. So more to come apparently, but this looks like a fun entry into hardware from a software company. The AtomoSynth Polivoks PF3. This looks like a serious piece of kit. It's a nice desktop unit that's got that Soviet era Polivoks filter inside, which was kind of the Soviets' answer to the Mini Moog, really. And the Polivoks filter, just has its own character through whatever it was, bits of old crap that they were using to tie the thing together. It has this own sound, this own arc. When you go through the cutoff, it just has a different feel to it to a lot of other filters. And so what AtomoSynth have done is taken a pair of them, stuck them in a desktop box so you could use it within like a Doorless setup. So, I mean, there's plenty of Polivoks filters available in Eurorack, that's fine. But in terms of having something more line level, which you can run through a mixer or with other synthesizers and bits and pieces, it gives you a whole Polivoks filtering engine, if you like, to run all of your lovely synthesizers through. So you've got a lovely Roland synth with a lovely Roland creamy filter. Then you can stick it through this and just wind in the gnarliness. You know, that's got to be a good thing. There's two of them. It's can work in stereo, which is nice, of course, obviously, with lots of your synths being in stereo, or you can run it as two monos. It also has a noise engine, so you can mix in a bit of noise with it too, which I think is a really nice touch. And you can link them together to use them as I say, as a single stereo filter, or have them running completely independently. I think it's a great idea, a great little box. I hope to see more filters in this sort of format. I think it's a good idea. Another good idea within it is the dry-wet mix. So you're not necessarily having to filter everything that's going through it. You can also route some of the original input back to the output. So you can have just like a soft filtering going on in the background, or part of it being filtered, or half the signal being filtered, while not losing the entire mix or the entire output of your synthesizer, which is really nice. I'm a fan of Tenderfoot Modular over there in Taiwan, and they do lots of interesting things. I've got bits and pieces of theirs knocking around, like the quad quantizer, for instance. It's quite brilliant, and I haven't yet really got to the bottom of it. A couple of little sequencers I've got of theirs, other bits and pieces. I use their Molt fella, Dupe down here, or Dupe, I'm not sure, all the time. Fantastic stuff. One of the new modules coming out of there is called the TrigSeq-1. And this is a 16-step trigger sequencer. So drum sequencing again. That's what we like. I've got lots of different ways now that I can do that sort of thing, including with the ASQ1 too. Yes. Yeah, so I should be up to my eyes in drum sequencing soon, and I think, because I hope to get one of these in as well, because it's again quite fascinating. One thing Tenderfoot are particularly good at is building a lot of functionality into a small space without it feeling crowded. I mean, that does inevitably mean a little bit of button pressing and potential behind the scenes menu messing about, but if the interface works right, then there's no reason why that has to be a hindrance. And in fact, in opening up the space, because often with trigger sequencers you have a lot of patch sockets and a lot of sliders and other stuff going on, whereas this is really quite compact. And that appeals to me. I like the two rows of LEDs and the offsetness of that. It reminds me of that Sound Machines probability box thing that I quite yet haven't got my hands upon. But with this, there's two modules. You can have the standard, and there's an expander for it, which gives you access to another 4 channels. So it has 8 channels of stuff in there. Potentially, the original module gives you 4, and you've got another 4 in expander. So it has the potential of running quite an impressive system within it. If the interface is workable enough, it could be a real winner. I don't know if you're familiar with GhostInTranslation. This is a guy who built this really interesting hybrid MIDI modular system. So essentially what it was MIDI control, but in a Eurorack form. So it fitted into a Eurorack case, it was the right sort of size for that, but it had no patch sockets. Instead, it was all running to a control board that went USB into your system. So you could essentially use these modules to control software, I guess, or other bits of hardware. And it gave you this interesting patch-free control system that was very much a hardware experience running other software things. This has started to develop, and now GhostInTranslation has got a new version of this coming along, which has embraced Eurorack fully in becoming patchable and analog, hybrid, digital kind of thing going on, and it looks really interesting. So this is kind of delving into the world of Teensy, which is what a lot of other manufacturers are doing, like noise engineering and such like, in using these platforms to build the synthesis on, and then the front panel and patching is building in the control system and the routing for bits and pieces. And so at the moment, GhostInTranslation is sort of working through the process of designing the interface that's best going to suit ultimately what it is that he's trying to do. There's still a lot of emphasis on MIDI control and I2C control as well. So, I mean, it's still under development. Exactly how all of these things are going to relate to each other, I'm not entirely sure, but it's a fascinating project, and I've been really interested to see where it's going to go. And until then, we can just gaze at it, quizzically, stroking our beards, looking at Instagram. Cherry Audio have taken on another synthesizer. This time it's the Elka. Oh yes, the Elka-Synth-X. This is what is it exactly? It's an Italian designed synthesizer that did some extraordinary things, lasted for about a week, and then disappeared completely, which is a shame. It came out around the time of the Prophet 5, of the Jupiter 8, of the Oberheim, OBXA, the big legendary synthesizers. And this thing came along looking kind of weird, kind of brown, is it brown? And creamy. I'm not really sure about that. I mean, honestly, for me personally, it just looks the right state. It doesn't really thrill me. There's something about the Prophet 5 that you just go, wow, that's a gorgeous piece of engineering. Something about the Jupiter 8 that just goes, that's just, it invites you in as an instrument. The Elka-Synth-X looks like some old organ, and you go, why would I want to play that? I don't know, it looks like Granddad's, keyboard that he would like. And maybe it does. I mean, ultimately Elka was an organ company, so that's kind of where they were coming from. And so it brought a bit of that vibe, a lot of that vibe with it, even though the synthesizer itself was designed by somebody else and was completely innovative and new. And in some ways, it's the organness about it that gives it its longevity and its individuality and its huge sound. Because there's nothing quite like it, I don't think. I was ill prepared for the sound that came out of my system. We're talking about software now, after all. As I was playing Cherry Audio's Elka-X, it's just like, but it has this layeredness about it, something that you didn't really encounter until the big workstation synths that were later in the 80s and early 90s. Whereas this was early 80s, really, because you had this two-layer system, which is you often had on organs. You would have either two keyboards on an organ, or you would have two layers in order to lay up different sounds. And the Synth-X followed that by having these two patches going on at once. Quite extraordinary. But the other key feature that it had was DCOs, digital controlled oscillators. These weren't digital oscillators. These were analog oscillators, but they were controlled digitally in order to keep them in tune, which was different to everything else. Everything else you had to spend time tuning them, which was a pain in the arse. So this is one of the reasons why this was so good. But it wasn't that, ultimately. I think it just came down to the fact it had this really big sound, and that comes across in the software very, very much. And of course Cherry Audio have augmented it with MIDI and MIDI control. They've added some more effects. It did have a chorus already built in, which is another reason why it sounded so good. But they've added a reverb and a delay as well, which of course they would, and they've expanded the polyphony and ironed out all the weirdness. And so it's now at its best, I suppose. But I mean, heck, it just sounds really good. I couldn't quite believe it. It has this sequencer as well that works brilliantly. Cherry Audio have built in an arpeggiator just for fun also, but some of those patches, I mean, normally speaking, when you get a new software synthesizer through, it always says, oh yeah, we've got this team of top producers, you know, to produce and create the patches for you, and you go, you go, yeah, okay, that's fine. With this one, actually, the other one that impressed me recently was the Oberheim, the SEM. The patches on that, fantastic. The patches on this, also fantastic. Like every one, and you're going to some of the sequences, and there's stuff going on, and there's stuff moving about. You're going, good Lord, listen to that. It has a quality about it that makes it sound like a mixture of an old string machine and some other synthesizer, just this mismatch of stuff. In some ways it doesn't have its own sound. It has a sound of a bunch of other synthesizers squashed together. And yeah, it's just very different. The thing about it I found is that you play it by itself. It's not something that you automatically think, oh yeah, that's going to drop nicely into a track. No, you think this is the track. I am Rick Wakeman playing everything all at once on this one thing. It's big sound, stuff going on, you know. That is definitely what it feels like, rather than I'm just going to slip this pad in here to the back of this track. No, it wants to be here. It wants to be everything. So maybe on reflection, it might be a bit of a struggle to try to squeeze that into usefulness. But heck, it's a joy to play. Really is. Really nice to play. And it's like $39 or something from Cherry Audio, which is silly. You know, stupidly cheap. It's great. It's really great. But it does absolutely hold on to that authenticity of looking a bit ropey. I mean, Cherry Audio, God love you. You do make some great sounding stuff, but your interfaces are a bit 2003, you know, a little bit synth edit. I don't know. I guess you invest your money and your attention in making it sound great, and so the looks ultimately come in second, and that's okay. But I do personally, I like something which is also visually pleasing, and this really isn't it. And I totally respect the fact that you have a zoom button that allows you to zoom in on the interface even more to make you go ugh, and then zoom back out again. Oh, that's not. I can zoom in over here. I mean, of course it's all right. It's all right. I'm not saying it's not all right. It's okay. It's just not a thing of beauty, you know. But sounds phenomenal. Do you think I got that across? I hope so. Ginkosynthese have been banging on about this module for quite a while. It's called Magma, and it's looking great, I have to say. This is a compressor. It's a compressor with a bit of sidechain, because we all like that these days. We like to sidechain our compressors so that we can let our kick drum through in that classic kind of way. But this is a diode-based compressor. Does that make it different? Apparently, yeah, it does. Apparently, that's pretty new and adds a bit of character and stuff that we won't have encountered before. So that's nice. But more importantly, it's got a glowy light on the front. This thing that glows with the warmth and awesomeness of it. So you know by that light, the signal going through it is being baked into something awesome. Anyway, if you're starting to get into compression in your Eurorack, then this looks absolutely the business. Right, to finish off with just a couple of more synthesizer rather than modular bits. First up we have Simon the Magpie. He recently released the Beehive massive yellow oscillator drone farm, which is fantastic. Lots of different banks of oscillators. Well, now he's produced a pocket version. I'm not sure how pockety it is. You think you need quite wide pockets. But anyway, it's a box and it's got 12 oscillators divided into 4 banks. So you have like 3 oscillators and then a volume knob. And you can pitch those oscillators whatever you like. It's a drone. You see, it's a drone. It drones. You're not trying to play it. You're not trying to sequence it. You're just creating these sounds and changing them. So you've got 3 together that you might pitch either the same for something nice that's just beating with itself, and then you can set up another note on the next one, and you can alter the levels, or you can have them all set to different things and bring different things in and out so that they mess with each other. Simple, good, interesting. Simon the Magpie is a great guy, and I love the fact that he's making hardware. It's good, fun stuff. So if you fancy starting your own sort of Wasp factory drone machine, then maybe give this a go. Twisted Electrons is having another go at the MegaFM. This is the Mark II, second generation of their quirky FM synthesizer. This time it's built on slightly different chips. I wonder why that may be. They can't get the other chips. Anyway, it's funny, isn't it, that the thing with the chip shortage is that it's pushing a lot of people into having to innovate, having to change, which must be an absolute pain in the ass. But at the same time, it means they keep coming up with new and slightly different, weirdly changed stuff. So this is probably one of those. But you can also swap the chips out yourself, because you normally have a bunch of chips knocking around. Have I got to get my own chips? Maybe that's the answer, that we now have to source our own chips. I mean, that's a little bit hardcore. So this time around, rather than using the sound chips from the Sega Mega Drive, they're using the sound chips from the Sega Mega Drive 2. It's actually very similar, but it has some better DACs for improved sonic fidelity and other bits and pieces. But instead of soldering them to the board, they've put them in IC sockets, which means just by flipping up the case, you can take them out and put in other ones. So if you've got an original one, you can put some of those back in for a bit of change, or even potentially use your own FM chips. I don't really know how that works. You can tell I wasn't here when this one came out, so I don't really know anything about it. But what I can tell you is that the MegaFM is an interesting and quirky take on FM synthesis, where you've got a number of operators you can select, a whole bunch of sliders for bringing different bits and pieces, envelopes and pitches and how they relate to each other in. And so it gives a very hands-on way of experimenting with FM synthesis. So if that's your bag, man, then the MegaFM Mark II will bring in a whole slightly different tones and allow you to mess with it yourself. And then from AtomoSynth, we have the Mochika X5, fifth generation of this synthesizer. This is a guy who keeps banging out these handmade synthesizers that continue to evolve, continue to get actually more interesting and more polished and more finished with more lights and lots of interesting bits and pieces going on. This is an entire semi-modular synthesizer voice that's now also available as a Eurorack version, or at least it's a version you can buy in a little case which can be taken out and stuck in your Eurorack. It has an analog oscillator with multiple waveforms. It has a wave folder. Everything has a wave folder at the moment. Wave folding is the thing you need to be doing. If you don't have wave foldering, you're not doing it. So it seems at the moment. So it has wave folding inside, allows you to flip those sine waves and triangle waves on top of each other. And it also has a digitally controlled square wave oscillator. It has interesting things like a Vectral-based filter for sound sculpting and some unexpected EQ, which you don't get on many synths, I don't think, of this sort of size. There's all the usual sorts of modulation with LFOs and ADSR envelopes, and also a little built-in sequencer. You can actually set 8 parameters per step, which kind of pulls it into quite a potentially complex area of sound and sequence generation. So it ends up being one of those synthesizers that looks relatively simple and straightforward on the surface, but actually behind it is quite an interesting digital engine for storing and changing parameters in a very step modulated fashion. It's all hand built in Peru, it's relatively affordable and is looking pretty nice. And lastly, we had the news that Moog are increasing the prices on things. This is a worry. It is. It's a worry because the price of gear tends to remain relatively stable. The only fluctuations you seem to get are in the second-hand market, which can go nuts for no reason from time to time. But generally speaking, the price on synths stays the same when you buy them from the shop. So to have a sudden large price increase from a company like Moog is quite alarming. I mean, it has to be the effect of things like the chip shortages, of things like the increase in energy prices, the cost of living going up. In different territories, this has been affecting people differently. But a price hike from someone like Moog really does bring these things into focus and makes you wonder how we're going to keep this going. How are we going to move forward? Should we be keeping it going? Maybe it's all time to move beyond this and get back to building our own instruments out of twigs. Who knows? But at one point, the Moog prices for things like the Matriarch and Grandmother just leapt like 60%. They've calmed down a little bit since because I think everyone panicked. Like Toman and Sweetwater panicked, threw these prices up, and then they've brought them down to something which isn't quite as bad, but it's still, it's still like a 30-40% price increase. I mean, companies have got to do what they've got to do. They've got to pay their employees and acquire stuff. They're not beholden to us and our desire to buy things cheaply. It's also interesting about the silence from Behringer over the last 6 months. They are evidently struggling to build things, evidently struggling to acquire the chips they need in the quantity where they can keep things as cheap as possible. So is it possible at this time that we are moving past the affordable synth space? I mean, let's hope not. Let's really hope not. Affordable synths are good. Expensive synths are good also. Not that everything should be, terribly, desperately cheap as chips. No, but for there to be an entry-level place for people to come is important. And if more expensive synths start to balloon in more and more price, then what's to stop the ones below from similarly moving up? Or if Behringer just decide they need to release something and just have to add €100 onto every product, that could be tricky. But it's one to watch, certainly. So that'll do. That's our bumbling through a load of stuff. I think this month that's plenty, I would say. Lots of interesting things. I'm sorry if I've been a little bit incoherent. I feel very incoherent. But I dearly hope that September, moving into October, I should get a lot more things done and should start finding my way again. This summer has been really quite difficult to get videos done, whether it's been the heat or the pressure of other work and getting food on the table and holidays and being away and other bits and pieces. So it's been quite slow in terms of videos, and I'm sorry about that. I have a lot of great products to tell you about, lots of great demos to do, lots of great ideas for interesting videos. All of it just trying to find the time to make that happen. But I'm going to have a concerted effort over the next 4 to 8 weeks to really push through on a lot of really good content for you lovely people out there. Otherwise, things coming up are Synthfest on the 8th of October up in Sheffield. That should be great. I plan to go. I plan to bring some kids to play on some synthesizers, have a poke around, shake a couple of hands, have a coffee, that kind of thing. I'm not doing anything there as far as I know, so I'm just going to be there, walking about, poking around at things. So if you go along, then by all means do come and say hello. I won't mind. I'll be embarrassed, undoubtedly, and won't quite know what to say, but I'll do my best to be cheery and friendly, because I mean to be in every way, and it's always good to say hello and to meet people and to chat about synths and stuff. So yeah, go and do that. That would be great. Otherwise, I sadly have no further news on my proposed Norwich Molten Modular Synth meet. Still looking for a venue. Have not managed to find a suitable venue yet, and annoyingly just don't ever seem to hear back from some of the venues I'd be really interested in using. I don't quite know what that's about. But anyway, if there's any further news on that, I'll let you know. I have a slight feeling that we might have to fold this over into the spring rather than trying to squeeze it in this year, simply because time is marching away and you need time to organise and market these sorts of things. But I still think it's a genuinely awesome idea that I'm going to continue to pursue. Also, this Thursday, if I get this video out soon enough, that's the 1st of September, in the Rumsey Wells in Norwich, there's another electronic music open mic, which will be great. I'm not planning on taking anything or going along necessarily. I will do if I can, but I'm not planning to perform at this particular one, but I will do in the future. But it's a really great thing to go along to. It's a great sort of downstairs at the Rumsey Wells bar is a pretty cool little place. It's small and cozy and snug, but they put on a good show down there, so do go and check that out. Otherwise, I think that's about it. Do come along on Sunday though. Sunday night, 8 o'clock, we'll be getting together, having a beer and checking out some things. I've got all sorts of boxes that have turned up in the last month or two that I haven't really spent any time with yet, that I'd love to drag out and throw together and have a bit of a play with over an hour or two. I think that could be fun, and will kickstart some of the movement towards doing videos on these lovely bits of gear. So lots of stuff to look at. So that'll be fun. Come and join us for that. Otherwise, that'll do. And in the meantime, go make some tunes.